Your home for the best sports coverage in Utah. You're listening to Jake Scott and Ben Anderson on 97.5 The KSL Sports Zone.
Jake and Ben, 97.5 The KSL Sports Zone. It's time to talk some BYU football. Let's get to our insider, Mitch Harper. Hit it, Christian.
It's time to get the inside info on BYU with Cougar Insider Mitch Harper of KSLSports.com on 97.5 The KSL Sports Zone.
Mitch, happy Friday.
Happy Friday, guys. Have to be on.
Mitch, we talked last week, you and I, not on the show, but in our meeting that we do, and we talked about how this Utah BYU game is probably going to be a lot closer than people thought. You were out ahead of it. What have you seen from BYU that put you in that situation, even though they've since beat Oklahoma State?
Yeah, BYU's just still kind of trying to find themselves and figure out, their systems. And I think there's been, a little bit of a learning curve for Kevin Young and his staff, particularly the coaches that have a lot of experience in the NBA and the G League. I think it's been a little bit of a learning curve and to really kind of coach and work with these guys. And I think one of the strengths of Kevin Young and his staff is that they communicate well with the players. And I think that, they've navigated a non-conference where they just hammered teams, and the teams were pretty bad. A lot of sub-300 Ken Pom teams, and you just didn't really get a true sense of maybe how good, how bad. Like, they're somewhere in the middle, but there was just really not a real barometer of where this team was at. And, Kevin Young sensed, he told us in the media, too, that he's like, this is going to be a little bit of a feeling out at the beginning of Big 12 play. So he could sense that, and then when you've got Yegor Demin, who was going through a little bit of a tough stretch where he just couldn't hit a shot. That's where a lot of these issues were happening. And against Oklahoma State, that was a good win. And I think that was something that BYU can build off of, because Yegor, I thought, he kind of found himself offensively again, at least knocking down shots. He's always a good passer, and he's making an impact there with his assists, but he's got to hit shots. And, Mawut Mag from Rutgers, he's come into the starting lineup, and he's been a real defensive specialist. He's a veteran. He's not fazed by, these big stages in the Big 12. He's been in the Big 10. I just think that, you're seeing the veterans start to shine too. And that's going to help BYU, because at this point now, what's unfortunate about non-conference, where you didn't get many, barometer games to really sense where you were, you now are in a spot where you just need to start winning games. And, ideally you want to have Yegor and Cannon Catchings be the guys that lead you, but you got to win if you want to be in a position to go to March and be in the bracket. So, these veterans, you might see more of these guys, the Dallin Halls, the Mawut Mags, Fus Traore, really leading this team, and Richie Saunders, because they've been through it before. And I think you're starting to see a little bit of a shift there with this BYU team.
How great is it that these two teams are playing in league again? Mitch, I was talking to Ben, who was talking about maybe these teams like BYU might not be playing as well as we thought they would, and Utah, the expectations are not exactly high. But I think it's great. This game finally matters again.
No question. It's been lacking, any sort of intensity. When it was being played in December and November even, it just gets lost in the football shuffle, and it really didn't have its own moment. And now this game matters in the conference standings, and maybe it can revive itself as, a game that matters in this market a lot. BYU and Utah in basketball, I think people forget, that was an amazing game. That was really big, and it's, one of the longest running rivalries in college basketball, 14th longest. This thing's been going on since 1908. And there's so much history behind it. And I think just having 2 games per year, the Big 12 understood that, get 2 of these games every single year. It's a big deal. And I just think that this will be, a fun stage to see these two teams battling in the Big 12. Utah's, playing good right now. BYU's got a little bit of momentum after their win. So both teams feeling like, this could be a critical game to, help them in their standings in the Big 12 and positioning for something greater down the stretch run.
Mitch, I thought it was a good sign that Richie Saunders didn't have to do everything for BYU to beat Oklahoma State. But what is his ideal role? I mean, does he need to score 20 a night in the Big 12 for BYU to reach their potential?
I think ideally he's not doing that because I think BYU probably doesn't want him to be the number one guy on the scouting report. Right now he is. He's averaging about 16 points per game in Big 12 play, 6 in the league right now. Ideally I think you want Yegor to be that guy or Catchings, but Catchings got, moved to the bench. And Yegor I think has got to be the one that emerges. But Saunders has been he's taken a massive step forward. I think this was one of the reasons why he turned down Kentucky and Mark Pope to come play for Kevin Young. I mean, he's always been a BYU guy. Like he just loves BYU. It's one of those deals where it's just kind of in him. He wants to be a BYU guy. He grew up dreaming of BYU. He even told me this week that for a brief moment after the Lon Wright's Utah team beat BYU, he's like, I don't know if I can handle being a BYU fan anymore. And then he quickly went back to it because he just loves BYU. But he wanted to play for Kevin Young because he thought that he could become something greater. Maybe, one day be a guy that's getting pro opportunities. Kevin Young's drawn comparisons to Alex Caruso for Richie Saunders. And I think that's a pretty fair comparison. The impact that Richie makes, he gets downhill defensively. He brings just tons of effort, and he's always someone that's willing to match up against one of the top players on the opposing team. So Richie does a lot of things for this BYU. And I think what's been impressive too, and when you talk about maybe long-term what he can be, 3-point shooting is where he's taken a big step. He's number one in the Big 12 in conference play. It is 3-point percentage at 48%. He's knocking it down at a high level. He's the one guy on this BYU team that consistently, night after night, is knocking down shots from three. If he can keep doing that and everything else that he's doing, Richie's, an intriguing player that can continue to get better and better.
Mitch Harper with us, of course, Cougar Insider here on Jake and Ben. What's the biggest story in BYU world right now, Mitch, or is it pretty much all quiet?
I think basketball right now is pretty big. And, they had there's a 5-star recruit that trimmed down his, top 11, if that's the thing. But, Nate Immense in BYU's, BYU's in the mix for him, a 5-star prospect. And, AJ DeBansa and him they got a little bit of a friendship and whatnot. So we could see, what if BYU can get in the mix for Nate Immense and maybe make a run at that thing. But, that's a big deal. But I think also the building of BYU football and how they're going to handle the heightened expectations. That's going to be a big thing for BYU this year. Everyone, seems to like, an underdog BYU, and BYU tends to thrive in those places. It's when expectations are placed on BYU teams, more times than not, it doesn't seem like they deliver and they get over the hump and do that. And BYU football is going to have a lot of expectations. And there's some, way too early polls out there that some don't even have BYU in the top 25, which I think is crazy because I think BYU next year should probably be a top 15 team, with everything that's coming back, and I think that BYU's got, the potential to be better next year, but easier said than done. The margins are very thin in the Big 12, and I'm really curious to see how BYU football, tackles next year and how much improved they are. And I think a lot of that will rest on, Jake Retzloff. And, Jake, I did a story on him this week on KSL Sports, and, he didn't consider any of the transfer portal, not that was, really brewing. But, when players have a big year and a breakout year, sometimes they like to leverage their value and see if they want to dabble in the portal and see if they can get even more money. And that wasn't a thought for him. And he noted that, him and Aaron Roderick, their relationship is as close as any quarterback OC probably in college football, as he pointed out. So, how can they take it to another level? Because I think a lot of it's going to rest on Jake Retzloff, because you can't assume you're going to get, 22 interceptions, set up for your offense, the defense getting that many takeaways. You can't assume you're going to have 5 special teams touchdowns next year. You got to have Jake Retzloff perform at a high level every single week. And there were weeks last season where he did it, but there were also games like Kansas State, UCF, where he performed at a really high level and looked outstanding. He's got to do that every single week. And if he can, BYU is going to be in a position to be in contention to win the Big 12 once again. So that to me is a big story for BYU sports is, BYU football taking on a spotlight role in a league that's still looking for, its premier programs, because that's still on the line here too. Through the first 2 years of BYU's existence in the Big 12, Texas, they're gone. Arizona State, historically, we've always seen Arizona State have some big years, but then they completely fall back to the pack. That's the theme of the rest of the Big 12. Can BYU start to establish itself as one of the mainstays that every single year you got to say, Kalani Sitake's program, they're always going to be in the mix. And I think that's kind of what's on the line in 2025 for BYU. And I think it's a really big opportunity. I think, the coaching staff, the program, they're sensing that opportunity with the way that they've been, adding players out of the portal. It's been a really productive offseason thus far for BYU as, we're about a month and a half until spring football, crazy enough. So it'll be here before we know it.
Well, Mitch, you're our favorite mainstay on the BYU beat. Thanks for jumping on with us, buddy. We appreciate it.
You bet, guys.